Okay, we're going to do a quick experiment with salt. So this is the watercolour salt technique, which is for snow and sparkles on water and things like that, but we're going to use it for the sparkly bits on our champagne. So I'm using gamboge yellow, which is like a golden yellow. I'm going to use it wet on dry, so I'm taking the wet paint, which I've watered down, and putting it onto dry paper. I've taped my paper down. This is the back of an old sheet, and it will buckle if you're not careful, so tape it down so it doesn't move too much. And we're going to do a 30-second and a 1 minute technique. Okay, so take your yellow and paint each square with the yellow quickly, because we want to do this all at once if we can. All right, so make sure it's not, it doesn't matter if you go over the edges, just get a good patch down. Okay, now time it 30 seconds. So if you've got a stopwatch or a phone or something like that, then you can time it. I'm just going to use my clock on my computer. And then we're going to take, after 30 seconds, we're going to take rock salt. This is rock salt and table salt. And we're going to put it on those little sections. My rock salt is very coarse. You can see it there. And the table salt is very fine. So you can use whatever salt you have in your cupboard. Right, we're on 30 seconds, so I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit onto my there and sprinkle the rock salt on there. Okay, so that's 30 seconds. This is drying off really quickly. So by the time we've done that, it'll be ready for the table salt to go on again. Okay, so we're on about a minute. So I'm going to put this on about a minute. And this on, which is probably completely dry almost. It's probably not going to absorb very much at all. Okay. Now, there's all sorts of variables with this. You can use different types of salt. You can use different colours. Some colours will react to the salt and some won't. So it's really down to you to find the yellow which is going to react to your salt that you're going to use. So make up a few sheets like this. Experiment with different times, different types of salt, different colours. Okay, sometimes it might only take 10 seconds. Sometimes it might take over a minute. So experimentation before you do your painting. I will do mine, and that is in accordance to the temperature in my room, the type of paper I'm using. Oh, there's all sorts of factors. But don't rely on my timings, because everything will be different with you. Make sure you do this experiment first and use the back of watercolour paper. Don't use the front, it'll be a waste unless you've got some really cheap stuff from, say, the Works or something like that, that, you know, is costing you very little money. Then go ahead, that's fine. Don't use cartridge paper because it won't work. Okay, good luck. So I've got my paper, A5 sheet of watercolour paper, stuck down all the way around the outside with masking tape. And I've drawn very lightly my two glasses on there. So the next stage is clean water and yellow. So I've got yellow, gamboge yellow here, and I'm also going to mix in a little bit of cadmium. So you can use either or both. A little bit of water and keep mixing until you think you've got enough. It needs to be quite strong, because if it's not, the salt won't take it up and it won't leave a decent enough mark. Now, I'm going to show you what to do if your salt doesn't work, or the yellow's too light, or whatever, later on. So don't worry too much if this process doesn't work. But like I said, the more experimentation you do in advance, the better. So do those test sheets. Now we want the yellow to come almost all over this picture, although there is some white at the top, sparkly bits. I'm making it more yellow than it is on the picture because I don't have any gold watercolour. If you have some gold watercolour or some goldy toned yellow, then you know that's great. The yellow ochre or sepia are also good colours to use. So I'm going to take this now. I'm going to use a big brush. I'm going to use one of my Chinese brushes. Now you might have a mop or something like that. Just wet it, but don't have it soaked. Pick up that colour, and you want to have your salt ready next to you. So I've got my salt here ready to go. I'm using table salt. I'm going to use a tiny bit of sorry, I'm using rock salt, but I'm going to use a tiny bit of table salt as well. Okay, but you need to be quick with this. Make sure you've got enough colour. This brush, these wash brushes hold a lot of paint. So here we go. So I'm just going to put it down the lower 2/3 of the picture. Make sure it's nice and strong. Okay, maybe up a little bit like that. You don't need it at the top. And then you can take your rock salt. Now, if you wanted to, you could place these salt particles in spots where you want the absorption to happen. So where the particles are larger, take the larger pieces. I'm selecting them and putting them down in spots. I mean, this is very precise. I mean, just sprinkle it on if you want to. You don't need to do it this precisely, but I'm just showing you what you can do if you want, right? So and then just randomly sprinkle some around the rest of the picture, mainly at the bottom. Okay, there. I think that's probably going to be about enough. And I'm just going to take a little tiny bit of table salt and just sprinkle a little bit around the top of the glass, just a touch, and maybe just a touch elsewhere, but not much. I don't want that to affect the picture too much. You may have to do this a couple of times before you get it right. It's up to you, really. Not to be too fussy. Don't use too much salt. Don't use too much water. Okay, and you need to leave this drying flat for as long as possible. Don't use a hairdryer because the salt will just blow off. Don't touch it with your fingers, because as soon as you move it, the mark changes. Okay, so leave it alone. Go and have a cup of tea. Let it dry off completely. You might think it's dry, but actually it's not. So the longer that you leave this, the better. And then make sure that you brush it off. Use a paintbrush and just brush it off into a bin. All right, don't leave it hanging around, because salt anywhere in your paint set on touching other paper will affect that paper. All right, so make sure you clean up well. And if you use a brush to brush the salt off with, make sure you wash it straight away. Okay, good luck. Okay, so this is the result. I left it to dry. It took about an hour. and you can see that I have small marks here where the table salt has worked, and then I've got larger marks down here where the rock salt has worked. So you need to assess your paper and decide if there's enough marks there or not, whether you like the marks, you might not like the marks. So decide. But there are two things that we need to do now. One is to lift off some highlights, some sort of flash marks, and then also to lift off some dots. So this is one technique of how to regain some marks if they haven't been achieved with your rock salt or your table salt. Okay, so to get the small circular marks, you use little dots of water, and to get the stripes we're just going to use clean water, medium-sized round brush, and just wipe your brush off on the side like that. And then all you're going to do, I've done one slightly lightly there, I don't know whether you can see that, but we're just going to put some lines of water. So just keep doing that. Add maybe 2 lines, one on top of the other, and then go somewhere else and add another one. Try and vary them in size. If you look at your picture, you can see they sort of radiate from the bottom, and we're just going to let that absorb into the paper a little bit, and then we're going to dab it off with a paper towel or a tissue or a rag, as long as it's clean. Okay, and you can make these lines thicker if you want to, thinner if you want to. Put the water over the top. You can see where the water's going just by moving your head, and you'll see that the light will catch the water. I don't know if you can see that. All right, and then before it dries, because you don't want it to dry, this is one technique of lifting off colour. Just take some tissue and lay it down flat on top like this. Press down, don't move it, and you'll see the colour absorbing into the paper towel. So you just do this once, do not move it, just press it. Okay, do this once, let it absorb, and then lift and see how much of the colour is lifted off. So you can see that there's a little bit of colour lifted off there. If you need it to be stronger, all you need to do is reapply water, because as with everything, watercolour is complicated, and some colours lift off really easily and others don't. Some colours will lift off and leave almost white paper behind, and others won't, because they're what you call highly staining colours. So this yellow is quite staining. You can see that the marks that are coming off are not going back to white, they're still remaining yellow, but they're just lighter. So reapply the water over the same marks, or make more, it's up to you, and then just reapply a new piece of tissue, lay it down carefully, press it, don't rub it, and let it absorb some more colour. And there we go. Okay, so you can see the colour on the tissue. Look, there's quite a lot lifted off, and you could probably keep going with more marks. Where's my pot gone there? You can make them bigger. So I'm just going to widen a couple of them up just by adding some more water at the bottom of the mark that's being made. I'm going to let that, each time make sure that you let it absorb into the paper. Give it 30 seconds, a minute or so, and let it absorb. Okay, so I'm going to do it again. Lay it down flat, dab it off. So you're just lifting the topmost layer of paint off of the marks that you've made. Okay, Okay, that'll do for me for now. Now with the dots is different. So all you need to do, take a soaking wet brush and just put in some little droplets of water. Now, some of you might have chosen to do this in acrylic, this bit. If you have, then you don't need to fuss like this. It's only watercolour that causes the issues. You can just repaint any white marks that you want back in using white paint. So again, just apply those little dots. I'm not following my picture here, but you should be looking at your picture and getting the dots more or less in the same place that they are in the picture. Some of them are high up here. You can do some dots up here. But we will be adding to this, so make sure you watch the whole tutorial before you make a decision as to what technique you're going to use. So as these are absorbing into the yellow colour, if you chose to do acrylic, what you would do is paint your yellow down, then add the black afterwards, and then you can put the white glittery marks on afterwards. Now they can either be a pale gold or a pale yellow or a pale white. You can make a combination of all those. But the technique is more or less the same. You're just not using all these specialist things which are to do with salt and drips and lifting off and things like that. Okay, so with the dots, I would let them sit. You mustn't, with any of these techniques, use a hairdryer because it really does affect how things work. If you and I can feel that I've still got salt around here. Make sure you get rid of all your salt before you start working. Don't brush it onto the floor, especially if you've got slippery floors, because you can then slip on it. We have to be very careful in the classroom about that, because, you know, especially on wooden floors and things like that, it's very slippery. Okay, so I don't know how long that's been down, maybe 40 seconds or so. Let's have a see if it's worked. So again, I'm using a larger piece of tissue. I'll do it that way. Just put it down and let it lift off. Just tear a little bit from there. Oops. Don't move it. I'm going to do that again. You can see the marks actually lifting. And take another piece and put it at the top, like that. Wait until you see the dots coming through and then lift off. Now, it's very subtle, very, very subtle. So again, if you want it to be stronger, you need to go back, reapply those dots. Again, it might be something that you can't see on film, but you will definitely see it on your paper. So just have the confidence that these marks are doing something. All right, it might be a very subtle effect, but it is working. All right, but it's quite fun to do. And just also recognize the fact that because it's on yellow and it's pale, that the marks won't be extremely strong. Again, this is a technique that you could practice on a darker color just to see how it works, and then maybe do it again. Okay. It's also more successful the better quality paint you've got and the better quality paper you've got. So just be aware of that. If you're using cheap paper, these very specialist techniques in watercolour don't work as efficiently. All right. You can use paper towel that has dried off. This hasn't dried off just yet. But if you've got any bits that are still dry or that have dried off, that haven't been used, then you can use them. Okay, so let's let that absorb a little bit longer, and then we'll start to have a go at lifting. Okay, so press and lift, and you can just see very subtle marks lifting off. You'll probably see them a little bit more effectively once they're dry as well. I'm just moving this piece of paper towel around. All right, so you can see there's some little, I don't know whether you can see those little dots appearing down here. All right, so just have faith and practice with a darker colour if you're not sure. So the next bit is to put the black on, and this is quite complicated. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly dry this off with a hairdryer. That's if my hairdryer is plugged in. I think it might be. You can dry this off. There's no salt on the paper, and we've got rid of the water so it won't spread. So I can just lightly dry this off now. Okay, so now comes applying the black. Now you might ask, why didn't we apply the black with the yellow? The reason being is, once the black mixes with the yellow, it'll go green because there's a lot of blue in black. So it's best to let this dry completely and then apply the black on top. All right, and we're going to do it very carefully, and we're going to use a technique. Let me just move this out a bit for you. Okay, so you can see the whole picture. I can still see my lines through the yellow, but once I apply the black, it's going to be quite difficult. So you will lose some of your pencil lines, okay? We're going to apply the black using a wet in wet technique, okay? So we're going to wet the paper first, and then we're going to apply the black. Now I've got black. You might not have black. You might have black. Or you might have Payne's grey or something like that. There's also different colours of black. There's ivory black. What are the other colours? Oh, I can't quite remember them now. But there are 2 or 3 shades of black in watercolour. So it doesn't really matter which ones you use. And Payne's grey is classed as a black, really. Okay, so first things first, we're going to apply a coat of water. I'm going to use, I've got a bit of dirty yellow water here, so I'm going to use that. You can see it's there. I'm just going to use it. All right. Doesn't matter with this painting because we're going to put black onto it, and we're going to apply the paint the water very carefully. All right, so it needs to go in there like that, and then in sort of stripes, but it needs to end in a point. So make sure that you lift your brush off when you hit the bottom. Okay, so I'm starting here and then lifting, so I get a point there and lifting. Even with this black, you need to be careful. So then apply the water everywhere other than down the bottom. We don't want to cover up our lovely marks too much, so I'm going to leave it at that. Again, you know, it might take 2 or 3 goes at this. This is a specialist technique. You might want to do a series of individual individual pieces, smaller pieces, and experiment rather than doing a finished one. Now you can see I've put it on, and this is where I need to move everything. So I'm just going to move everything away and I'm going to lift, and I'm going to let this paint travel down to the bottom like that, so it's on an angle. Now if you've got lots of runs coming off, then just dab them off with some paper towel, and we're going to take a brush and we're just going to, oops, let me just get rid of that there. So have a paper towel at the bottom. You can use the old sheets that you've been using before, and you're just going to, you can take up a little bit of the paint. We're just going to encourage it down into that water and down and into this triangle. Now if you've got a little bit of a run like that, just lift it off, lift it off, lift it off, and you can drag this down like this. So you need to do this reasonably quickly, and it is difficult. All right, don't expect it to be easy. Don't expect it to work the first time that you do it. All right, it's a very difficult technique. We've got a bit of a pool here, so I'm just going to try and sort that out. We've got a little bit of a run here. It will depend on how your paper's behaving. Oh, I know. You could take a fan brush and just drag it down like this. Dry fan brush, drag it down. All right. And if it's dark in places where you don't want it to be dark, just rub the brush over. That's it, like that. Can you see how that's working now? Okay, some of these edges are a little bit hard, so this is how you sort them out. You take a clean, damp brush. So I've got a clean brush. I've just dabbed it off on a paper towel, and I'm just going to lift okay, I've just wet the fan brush. I'm just going to go in and soften up those edges. Okay, right, that'll do. Now, before we do anything, I want you to put this back down again, and I would like you to apply more colour to the top section. So this is still wet, and we're darkening up this top section. You haven't put any more water on, but we're using a little bit more colour up the top. It's going to be, well, it's not going to be as dark as this picture, but it's going to be dark, okay? Oops. Taking the fan brush again, and I'm just going to drag the colour down like that. Now, you might sort of say, oh, we've covered up all our lovely salt marks. So if you've got rid of them by mistake, like I have, then this is what you can do. So you can take the salt again, and you can just pop it on there. I'm going to put some on the top. You might find this works better because it's darker. So if you've covered up all your marks, then apply some more salt. There, all right. So that's a second layer with a second layer of salt. Okay, and then you again just leave this to dry. And don't worry about the fact that it's not dark enough, okay? Okay, so this is now dry. I added some extra black with a fan brush. I've also put some extra dots on here and lifted it off. I basically repeated the technique that we had earlier on with the yellow on top of the black. So I lifted off some lines, I lifted off some blob marks, some sparkles, and this is the underpainting basically for the picture. So you've done this in watercolour, you might have done this in acrylic. You can follow the same technique, but instead of lifting paint off, I mean, you can do that. You can apply more paint, just wait for the layers to dry. So apply the yellow, add white over the top for the little white marks and white for the streaks, add black later. Make sure that the yellow is dry before you add the black, because again, the same thing will happen. It'll mix and it'll go green. All right. So hopefully you've got something like this. See this as an experiment in technique, right? So it's how to use a fan brush, how to lift off, how to add salt, all those things, how to create layers. So see this as a technique. If it doesn't work out, just try again and try each technique slowly and methodically, and hopefully you'll get there. But like I said, it's a difficult one. Okay, so now this is going to become a mixed media piece because I'm now going to start using acrylic. So acrylic is different in the fact that you can't lift it off. So once the mark's on there and dry, that's it. The only thing you can do is paint over it. The watercolour at this stage, even when dry, can still be lifted off. So you can change it. So at this moment, if there's anything that you need to change, then change it, because once you start applying the acrylic, that's it, it's over. Okay, so what I've got is some I've got a paper plate, and I've just got some white, some yellow, and some black. It's actually Payne's grey, and those are the colours that I've got on me at the moment. I haven't got any gold, I haven't got any orange. There are different colours in this picture. You quite, go ahead and mix them up. But I'm just going to work with those three colours for the moment, all right? I'm going to use a small round brush and I'm going to apply some water to this. I want to get the acrylic moving. My white is a bit thick, so I'm just applying a little bit of water. Don't apply too much. As I've said before with acrylic, the less water you use, the better, all right? So you need a small round brush, and this even might be too thick. So as a backup, have a detail brush available. So I've got this detail brush. It's got quite a long handle. I'm trying to think if I've got another one. Yeah, there's a shorter one. This one's quite bent because I left it standing up in a jar, which I shouldn't do, but you can see that that's really diddy. So if this brush turns out to be too thick, I can use this detail brush, okay? And if you haven't got a detail brush, buy yourself one. If you're going to carry on painting in both watercolour and acrylic, you need detail brushes to finish things off. And it's often the details that cause the issues with people, because the lines are too thick, for example on branches on trees and things like that. The lines are too thick, and that's just simply down to the tool. It's not down to your painting ability, it's down to the tool. Okay, so I've got the detail brush and I'm just gonna make sure that it's full of paint and that it's moving. Again, test it out on a sheet if you need to, but it needs to be liquid enough but not too liquid that you can see through it, and needs to fill your brush up nicely without dripping off. Okay, so I can still see my glass marks, so I'm going to pop them back in with a bit of white acrylic, and the reason why I'm doing this is so I can see what I'm doing. Now you can do this with gouache, so if you want to practice with your gouache, you can use gouache. It does sit on your paper nicely, and it sits on top of a watercolour paint nicely, and also it's something that you can actually lift off. So if it doesn't go quite right, then you can lift it off. The other thing you can use is a pen, and I'm going to do one of these glasses using paint, and then the other one, oh, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze, I think. Oh, no, it's gone. No, it hasn't. It might come back. So I'm going to do this left-hand glass using this white acrylic. Like I said, if you can't see your pencil marks, then reintroduce them before you start painting so you don't get lost. I can see mine. You might not be able to see mine either now. How far up that glass? I think it goes up to about there. I've lost my pencil mark where the black has come in. So I'm trying to think if it goes like, yeah, sort of like that. Okay, and then you've got the top of the glass. How far does it come up? It comes up to there. And that's where the chink is. So it must go across there like that. Yeah, I can just about see the pencil mark underneath. It's about there. So there's a very thin line, almost transparent. So I'm going to leave that nice and thin. And then you've got some thick, much thicker marks. I've got a lump of paint. Oh no, that's salt there. Can you see that? I'll have to take that off afterwards. You might find that there's bits of salt left, and if you can, get them off. So the white goes on nicely. There's sort of a little circular mark there. So I'm going to take up some thicker paint. I'm going to put that in like that. And then it comes down, there's another line. It sort of fades off about here. So I'm going to carry on painting this. I'm going to put it on time lapse. But before then, I want to just show you how to use. So you just carry on with the white basically. And I've got these pens. These are called Posca pens, and they're basically acrylic paint in a marker. That one works okay, so I'll use that one. You can buy them online, but they're really, really useful, especially for watercolours where you've lost whites and for detail. So you need to shake them up. They've got a metal bar inside and the paint is inside, so you need to mix the paint so it comes out properly. So I'm going to do this one in white pen. So you just basically paint it on, and it's much easier than using a paintbrush. All right, so I'm going to use the white, both in pen and in liquid form. I'm also going to mix some white with a bit of yellow and use a bit of that as well. And I'm just going to paint this in. So I'm going to put it on time lapse so you don't, because it's going to take me a little while to paint in. You can watch it quickly. If you need to, you can slow down the time lapse, pause it and just watch it in bits. Okay, you can sort of, I don't know whether you've worked that out in the videos, hopefully that you have done. Okay, so I'm just using white acrylic or white acrylic pen, or you can use gouache. All right, white watercolour won't work because it just absorbs into the paper, and you can just watch me paint. Now, so like I said, just white acrylic as it is, white acrylic with a bit of yellow just to give it a little bit of colour, and then I'm going to dot on here lots of dots of white acrylic, and I'm going to mix in a tiny little bit of blue into some of the dots that are coming off because they've got a slightly off-white colour. Okay, I will reintroduce black into the stems and into the centre of the glasses as well. Okay, again using dot technique. You can use a sponge in here if you wanted to create that little sort of fluffy feel in the water. You can use a flicking technique, that's with a toothbrush, to flick dots onto the top of the glass afterwards. I might show you that afterwards anyway. Okay, so it's all going to be on time lapse, so enjoy watching. Okay, here's the finished image. Now, it doesn't look as dark as the original. The original is a photograph, and I quite like the graphic quality of it, but you would approach it in a different way if you wanted to get that result. I just wanted to do a painting of 2 glasses of champagne and the fizz that's coming off of it. So everybody's will be different. Everybody's will have more yellow or more black or more dots or more salt or more reflection on the glasses or da-da-da-da. But just accept that everybody's will be different, and that you might try one and it'll be a complete nightmare, and then maybe try another and it'll be fine. It might be that you want to just use acrylic, just gouache, just watercolour, or a mixture of all 3, or try the pens. But these are all experiments in technique, as well as producing a reasonably decent image at the end of it. But it's more important that you play and that you experiment with little swatches and you understand the techniques, what works, what doesn't, what you might want to use in the future in other pictures. You might get a decent image out of it at the end. If so, well done, brilliant. I've taken off the masking tape. It does make the picture look finished. And what else did I do? I used the pen on here. I used the white pen and the black pen, Posca pens. If you've got any other types of pens, use them. They need to be acrylic pens though, or if you've only used watercolour, then you can use watercolour pens. They do exist. You might find there's a slight change in a strength of colour, so you'll get more of a washy type effect rather than a stark effect like you do with these pens. This side was just done with paint. Takes a little bit more time. The layers might need to be increased, so if you want it to be really strong definition of white, then you might have to put 2 or 3 coats on in order to get that, depending on the quality of your white acrylic. Mine is cheap and it means it gets a bit streaky, so I need to put 2 or 3 coats on to get it strong. I used a little bit of tissue, I don't know whether you noticed, but I used a little bit of tissue just to sponge, or a bit of sponge in here, in this bit here, just to soften it a little bit, using the same colours. I used Payne's Grey here and here. I used white acrylic markers on this side for the dots, and white paint on this side for the dots. I put some little crosses on some of them to make them look like they're spreading. And then I used 2 other tones. I used a purpley tone and a blue tone for the dots. It's important that you have different tonal varieties in water, sparkles, all that sort of thing. They're not just white. It's like stars. They're not just white. They're all different colours. And you could even put some yellow or gold in there. I also added some yellow acrylic in here. And what else did I do? That was it, I think. Yeah. Okay. So enjoy. Do a small one. And then if it doesn't work out, then at least you haven't wasted too much paper. But try it again. If the first one doesn't quite work out, you can make this darker by adding more colour. I am all right with it. I'm just going to leave it as it is. Okay, hope you enjoy it. It is a toughie. Bear with it. It might be one that you never want to see again. It might be one that works out really nice and you can use it on a card or send it to somebody who's having a celebration of any kind. You could even write something over here. Congratulations. Use a letter set, or if you've got nice handwriting, then you could write onto it. All right. Let me know if you have any real issues. I'm always here for questions. I'll answer whatever questions you've got. Okay. Good luck with it, everybody. I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see the detail. Okay. I hope you enjoy. It's very textural and quite satisfying actually. Okay, bye for now. See you next week.